too. What up, Chloe? Chloe Cole.
How's it
Greetings.
going? Thanks
Good
for
man.
having
Good to
me.
see. Thanks. Good to see you again. We met at AmFest back at on Turning Point like a month ago, I guess, month and a half ago or something.
Almost 2 months ago, yeah.
That was wow. That was awesome.
I was. I'm actually back in Arizona right now.
Oh,
I'm in
cool.
Phoenix.
Where's your home? What are you doing there?
I was just doing some local events here. I'm gonna be heading home here and I'll be doing that tonight. I'll be heading back home tonight.
You're based in Cali.
Yeah, I'm from Central California. Kind of like
So
in the
for
Stockton, Modesto area.
people that don't know, you basically were like transition genders when you were a young kid, like I guess what, 13? What age? Like, do you want to tell the story to let people give them a synopsis?
Yeah, so I am a female detransitioner. I am 19 now, but between the ages of 12 to 16, I was going through a medical and social gender transition. Um, I was 12 when I started calling myself a boy, started using different names, um, and changing my presentation to be more masculine. And at 13 was when I started the course of the medical interventions, which was it was a very quick onset. Um, they started me with Lupron to suppress my puberty. They put me on androgens to masculinize my body and have the masculinizing effects. And at 15 years old was when I went under the knife to get my breasts surgically removed. And I realized less than a year later that I wanted to become a mother, that I wasn't really properly fully informed of what these treatments would really do to me, and that a lot of my dysphoria it came from a place of trauma and issues that weren't really resolved during the course of my transition, during the the therapy that I was going through. And I decided that I wanted to stop transitioning. And I've been speaking out about my experience with transitioning and detransitioning as a kid since I was 17, and trying to advocate for the rights of these kids who are experiencing this to growing up with their bodies fully intact and healthy, and for the rights of their parents to raising them as they see fit.
What when you did androgens and Lupron, what was it like? Were you 14 when you started taking it?
I was 13.
13.
I was only about halfway through my eighth grade year actually when they started me on this. And the puberty blockers were pretty tough. I was on them alone for about a month. And I mean, once the hormones completely cleared out of my body, I was basically in like a premature, artificially induced state of menopause. So I was 13, experiencing things like hot flashes, which I mean I could best describe as uncomfortable, like just these uncomfortable hot sensations, just like moving through my body, and it was accompanied by these like uncomfortable, itching, tingling sensations, like in my upper torso and my limbs and arms, and I was very lethargic when I was on it. It felt like emotionally I was very blunted, and it just sucked to be on. And it was like every day I was just waking up, counting the days down till my first testosterone shot. So once I started on the testosterone, it was like, I mean, I felt amazing. Like I felt like I finally had my energy back. I I wouldn't really say that I was happy because it wasn't really coming from any real place. But I was excited, looking forward to these changes in my body, to looking more and more like a boy every day, um, to having my voice drop deeper, and hopefully the social changes that would come from that. And I, you could say that I was experiencing the gender euphoria that you might often hear these activists or these doctors talking about, because I felt like I was that this was bringing me closer to the boy that I was told that I was supposed to be.
Who told you it?
Um, I mean, in the transgender community, there's this idea that by going through with these treatments, by changing your body, by changing what's on the outside, you'll become okay on the inside. This course of treatments is an innate part of your identity. And I truly believed myself to be a boy. I wasn't I didn't know any better.
Just because like when you're, I don't want to cut you off because I like how you're like going, you're bursting, and then you take a moment and then you explain it some more. Because when you're young, when you're 12, like I used to play Wonder Woman. I used to pretend I was Wonder Woman. I'd dance around out back because I loved her because she reminded me of my mom. And they were like, if my parents were like, oh my God, he's a girl, they might have sliced my nuts. Like I might have been like transition, but they were like, well, he's playing pretend. He's maybe, and then I was like, I want to be an actor. When I was 13, I was like, yeah, I like to, and I played a woman on stage before. It was exotic. I wore high heels. It hurt like hell. Like I, I don't care. But then I would go sleep with my wife or my girlfriend. And like, yeah. But like, as a kid, I don't know. I wasn't like hyper socialized as a kid because the internet wasn't around yet. It was like 94 or 91 when I was that age about.
Yeah, and my parents they were very sensible about it. They kind of saw it very similarly as like, oh, this is just play. This is her trying to experiment and find her identity. They didn't when I told them how I felt about this, how I felt about myself, and that I wanted to be a boy, they wanted to be supportive of me and help me feel comfortable, and they even went along with referring to me as their son and by my preferred name, which I don't think they should have. Um, because I feel like it kind of reinforced these feelings that I had. But they were sensible. Um, they wanted to just allow me to be a kid. They didn't want me to start this this course of treatment. They wanted to allow me some time to think it over, to kind of just explore, to be myself. And they had no idea that by bringing me to the therapist, that I would be fast tracked into this course of treatment.
That's wild. So like the therapy, what was it like? Like how did they so many questions about it, but like can you explain what it was like going in and the whole thing?
I mean, it was horrible because my mom and dad, what they really expected out of it was that they would help me through this time, that they would teach me how to cope with these feelings, and just in the meanwhile. And once I was an adult, I would be allowed to make a decision around this. But that it's likely that I would have grown out of it. Um, but they were not allowed into the room during these sessions. They weren't even followed up with after I was done speaking to these psychologists. So my mom and dad, they really had no idea what was actually going on, what we were actually talking about. And frankly, it was really nothing. Like sure, they were affirming me and calling me by my preferred name and as a boy, but they weren't really addressing these real issues that I had in my life with things that were going on at home, things that were going on at school. Um, I was pretty depressed during that point in my life. Um, I didn't really have very many friends. I was going to my eighth grade year, and I was friends with people who were all in older grades, so everybody had already graduated. And because I was trying to pass myself off as a guy, but I wasn't really, I still was very feminine looking. I was pretty awkward, and people would often pick on me for it. I didn't really feel like I had anybody to call my friends or people who I could confide in. And it was just like every time I would go, I would think, I mean, I'm going to therapy, right? Like I'm supposed to be getting better, but nothing's happening. And it made me feel hopeless. And so I started to internalize these feelings. And of course, because I was becoming more distressed about those other things going on in my life, I started feeling the same way about my transition. I started feeling like just calling myself a boy and dressing like one isn't enough because the people around me, they're picking on me because I'm different. I wish that I really was just like any other boy. I wish that I looked like them. I wish that I had a deeper voice like them. If that were the case, then maybe I'd be happy. And these feelings were never explored. They never really questioned why I felt this way. These doctors that I had, these people who were supposed to be the real adults in the room and help my mom and dad with raising me through this, weren't doing their job. They were just letting my childish judgment run the entire course of this treatment that I didn't need.
Childish judgment, dude. That's the thing. If you're super nerdy, it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl, you get rocked. I was like real nerdy as a kid. And because I was two, I didn't know, I didn't have like the best social skills. My parents were always like, if he's mean to you, just be nice. One day they'll realize what they did was wrong. And I think they're right, but it takes 20 or 30 years for the person to be like, hey, sorry, I pushed you into the locker in fourth grade or whatever. But like I would always raise my hand because I always knew the answer. I would listen, and then the teacher would like call on me and I'd answer, and then she'd ask the next question. I raised my hand, and then she'd like look behind me around the class, like anyone, and I'm like, and then eventually, I think the other kids were like, "Fuck this motherfucker, this know-it-all piece of shit," and then they started like isolating me, and I was like, I just hung out with the really nerdy kids. And all I wanted to do was be popular. I was just like, why do the boys and the girls, why do those girls like those boys? And I would like sit at the table with like three super nerds. We did math problems in the morning, and I'd like look over at the cool kids. And I wasn't an athlete. That was part of it, maybe, but I didn't want to get hit by a baseball. I was like, it hurts to get hit. I don't know. I had a somewhat hard time too. But what was your like main trauma growing up? Do you talk publicly about it?
I do. Um, I don't think I really had any significant traumas um, until I started transitioning, actually. But I mean, growing up, I was kind of a little bit on the awkward side. I was an artist. I was diagnosed and treated for ADHD, but it never really worked out. And a lot of people who I'm close to, and I myself strongly believe that I'm actually on the spectrum, but I missed the opportunity to get a diagnosis while I was young. It wasn't really considered until I was a bit older. Um, Although my mom and dad, I when I was in kindergarten or preschool, my teachers told them that, hey, like your kid is probably she might be on the spectrum, and we'd recommend you guys getting her screened for that. But when they went to my pediatrician, they're like they just refused to even diagnose me or consider it. They said, no, your child is definitely not on the spectrum. She's smart for her age. She socializes well. And it wasn't until, again, in my later adolescence when I was referred actually by a doctor who was involved in my transition to another course to a course of for a diagnosis for this. And again, I we got pretty much the same answer, like, well, your kid is it's very unlikely that she's on the spectrum because, she's well spoken, she is intelligent, which is kind of it's such a strange judgment to me because a lot of people who are on the higher functioning end of the spectrum tend to be very intelligent, well-spoken people who socialize well with the people around them. But I mean, they really dropped the ball on that, and I feel like if I had been diagnosed earlier in life and I had gotten treatment for it, it would have helped me with some of my social difficulties and my difficulties with my schoolwork growing up. Which I mean, I didn't really feel like I fit in a whole lot. I'd always kind of been struggling to find my own niche and to feel like I had an identity growing up. Um, and I had a move of neighborhoods when I was roughly in about fourth or fifth grade. And it's like after years of struggling to find friends, I finally had a group. And then all of a sudden, I was back at square one. And it was, I felt that loss for years. Um, it made me feel like this sense of insecurity in my surroundings. Like nothing was forever, that I couldn't rely on anything or anybody. And I started to withdraw a bit socially. During that time, I started to spend a lot of my time on the internet. And once I got my first phone, I started using social media because, I mean, I kind of had a hard time interacting with some of my classmates and friends from school. I never was really close with anybody, but this kind of gave me like a comfortable means of doing that and seeing where everybody's at, what they're all doing. And I also started browsing some communities online that were kind of like based around my own personal interests, things um, like video games or like comics or anime or TV shows that I liked. And I started noticing something that a lot of these communities had in common, being that a lot of the users within them were like young men and women and teens who identified as part of the LGBT. Um, some of them called themselves like gay or lesbian. Some identified with alternative labels like pansexual, genderless. But a lot of them were young women around my age who identified as the opposite sex. And I started seeing, because like they were using like LGBT hashtags and the overlap between the two groups, I started seeing more and more posts that were just focused on that community. And it was something that I found really intriguing. It really caught my eye with just all these new concepts, these new words with which you could describe yourself and your identity, and all these colorful flags and the artwork around it really just drew me in. And it seemed so loving, so closely knit. And I would like keep up with like some of these people's accounts, and they would talk about their own personal stories, their struggles with things like bullying or never really feeling like they had the place in the world. Some of them were abused or neglected, and they would go through all these trials with their identity, with feeling like they had a place to call home. And for them, this was it. And just it was something that gave me a sense of hope. It hit close to home because I felt like I really related to these people, especially in my upbringing, in my personal interests, and the way that I felt about a lot of things. And so after some time, I started to think, well, why do I feel so attached to them? What is it that I personally feel like I relate to? I started to question first my sexuality because there were some times in school that I had like crushes on my friends or female classmates. And then once I realized I didn't really care about that, it was like it still feels like there's something that's off, something that's setting me apart. Because I don't really necessarily know what it means to be or feel like a woman. I never really felt like I connected very well with my sisters or my mom or the girls around me, or like I really had any female role models that I could really trust in. And I thought that maybe that meant I just wasn't supposed to be a girl.
I know. I thinking about my dad was a big help because I tested for autism like 8 months ago just to see. I took the test and I was like 3 points away from being autistic. I was like, oh, okay. But I realized some of the questions were like, do you ever have a question that something something? And I was like, oh, what I realized was the way my dad raised me veered me away from being autistic. Like the way you're raised can also kind of guide you towards that behavior of autism. Because if I ever had a question, I would ask him and he would give me an answer. And that was extremely helpful to like sort out who I was. Even if he didn't know, he'd tell me and he'd kind of explain the confusion around it. So that was kind of interesting. Did you when you were going into these forums, did you ever talk to them face to face on audio, video, or was it all text?
No, I actually never really interacted with these people directly. I was mostly
It
just
cut out.
observing
Can you hear
them.
me?
Yeah, I can. Are you able to hear me?
It was either me or you, Chloe. Did you?
Sorry, I'm on
You
hotel
just cut out.
Wi-Fi.
Oh, cool. Oh yeah, that's right.
Cool.
You're in Arizona. Nice.
Yeah,
Okay, wait. Tell me that again. So, oh yeah, video chat or text or what?
I wasn't really interacting with these communities at all, beyond really observing them for the most part. I had a lot of interest, but I didn't really. It was something that it was a conclusion that I made pretty much on my own terms after like observing these people for a little bit and starting to do like some of my own research.
Like LG, like what is it? What is LGBTQ kind of thing? Like, did you ever tell your parents like, look at this and look at these words? Because and then they were like, I don't know what that means, or were you just like, they don't know what this means? I'm not. They're not the people that should talk to about it.
I didn't really talk to them actually about what I was seeing on the internet. I basically had like unrestricted unrestricted internet access, and they didn't really know what I was seeing online while I was growing up. And a lot of it was, I mean, a lot of it was very harmful. Other than this, like I was being exposed to like a lot of ideas and content that I honestly should not have at the ages that I was. And I feel like in a way that kind of influenced my decision to transition, especially when it came to like my like being exposed to things like pornography and some like more niche political communities. I felt like feminism, for example, like I because of I mean pornography, um, I and social media in general, I felt like there was a standard as a woman that I couldn't really match up to. Um, that I'd never be pretty or feminine enough to really be good enough. And a lot of the feminist ideas that I was seeing on websites like Instagram kind of reinforces ideas that being a woman was going to be hell, that women are inherently oppressed, that we have to fight for our rights, and that the entire experience of being a woman was just painful and something that I felt like I didn't want anything to do with. I wanted to run away from it, that it was just a big responsibility that I never would really want to take on. Um,
What, how old were you when you saw porn for the first time?
um, I think I'd been first shown it by a classmate while I was still in elementary school, so probably roughly about like 9 years old.
Was it just
Far,
like,
far too young.
because I've noticed like some porn is like can be loving, like two people having sex, they like each other, and then they're done. And then sometimes it's like hard and they're hurting each other, and like they still call it porn. They call it all the same thing, but it's like what is normal? And like to not have some sort of objective like look at it from just your living your adult life and like well I've that's like, obviously like that would be I think would be challenging to not be able to tell the difference.
I mean, I think it was more so like the former, but at the just at the age that I was, it just having that in my head, having that exposure would just it would never be appropriate. But
Man,
my mom and dad, they were completely unaware about all of this. They had no idea what I was seeing online, and I didn't really feel like I was close enough to them to really even consider talking to them about it until I was already a few months into socially transitioning. Um, I didn't want to start by telling them about it because I was scared of how they might take it. I didn't know if they were going to be supportive of me or I don't know. I mean, reading other people's stories with how they were bullied or abused or like kicked out of the house for coming out to the parents as gay, it kind of put this. It felt like it kind of added this pressure. Um, and at school, when like the few people in my grade level that I told them about this at the time, they took very negatively to it, and it wasn't just like pushing back out of concern, right? It was like, oh, like that's really weird of you. Like, why would you do that? Um, but I wanted to kind of allow myself some time to um, settle into this identity that I was creating for myself, and slowly cut my hair shorter over time. Secretly, like going to the store and buying boys' clothes and getting rid of my girls' clothes, in hopes that I could be more convincing to the people around me as a boy. And once I decided I was ready, I wrote a letter to my mom and dad, um, just detailing them these feelings that I had, about myself, about wanting to be their son instead of their daughter, and hoping that they would accept and still love me after the fact. And they very much did. And they wanted to let me know that. But this is something that was very novel to them at the time. Um, I'm their youngest kid out of five kids. And there's kind of a significant generational gap between me and my older siblings because like they're all like 7 to 8 years older than I am. And this is something that they had never really talked about with my mom and dad. It was something that they never had really heard of before outside of like the news and through the shows in media that they would watch. But to hear it from their own kid, they were very shocked. It was not something that they were expecting. They knew that I was a tomboy. They knew that I kind of struggled socially. And that I was just the kind of girl to to think a little bit more outside the box. But this is something that they didn't really feel prepared to deal with.
And they were like, okay, you're taking point on this one, Chloe, we got your back. But like in a perfect world, if you could like change, and maybe you wouldn't even change the past, I don't know. But if would they would you have them be like, no, stop, we need to, or would that have made it worse?
Um, I mean, I feel like they should. I can't blame them for reacting the way that they did. They didn't really want to push me any particular way, but I feel like parents in general, when dealing with this, should not affirm in any capacity this idea that their child has about being born in the wrong body, because once you start referring to them by their chosen name, by the wrong pronouns, and calling them your son instead of your daughter, and vice versa, you're really entertaining this idea that the way that they were made was wrong, that their perfectly healthy bodies have to change. And my mom and dad, they did push back a little bit, mainly when I would talk about starting the interventions, because they were worried. They had a reasonable mindset around this. They wanted to just allow me to be a kid, but they weren't really sure how to go about this. And that was when they started doing their research online. They started looking up what to do about this. And everything they saw was pretty much pointing them in the direction of affirmation and towards medical resources. Um, they found a source that recommended Kaiser Permanente, which was our healthcare provider during this time, as the top choice in the entire state of California for care of youth that experience gender dysphoria, or for kids who identify as transgender. And they thought that care would just mean like, oh, they're going to give her psychological help during this time. But every single almost every single doctor I had only went the affirmative route, and they expected my mom and dad to go along with it.
Like, how's therapy? I've never been to therapy, and I probably should. Are they supposed to be like, because they're not supposed to tell you what you are? I know that they're supposed to like listen and ask questions, but like, is it like they're over confirming your state of mind? And a good therapist is supposed to just be like, oh, I understand that that's how you feel, but not be like, it's okay. I don't know. How does that, what's your experience? What?
I personally feel like a good therapist, a good psychologist will push you. They'll push the answers out of you, and they'll push you into improving yourself and learning how to deal with these issues in your daily life. And I mean, I would talk to them about my problems at school with being bullied and not really having any friends. And I mean, all they would really do was just like be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you. What are ways that you can distract yourself in the meanwhile?" Basically, like it was nothing really substantial. And I had multiple therapists over the years, and that was all that it really felt like. Like I wasn't really being taught or pushed to get better. And most of the time, when I was improving, it was independently of these doctors who were supposed to help me.
So like you were like, hey doc, I've got this festering wound. And he's like, here's some band-aids. Here, cover it up. Put this
Yes,
on. Wait till it gets
I
better.
mean, the transition and eventually the other drugs that they put me on, um, to address my depression that developed over the course of my transition, and the difficulties with my schoolwork. They put me on stimulants so that I could focus.
What ones?
Um, it was I mean, I can't remember exactly which medications. I think it was like Ritalin, Adderall. They're constantly switching me between different doses and different medications. And it all really was just a band-aid for a large wound.
I would say, again, when you were saying kids coming out to their parent like about whatever problem, is like I think a lot of parents in the modern age are relating transgenderism to gay, because when it's gay, when you're if you're coming out as gay, it's like I'm attracted to this kind of person, and that's like I'm going to support who you are, whatever. Maybe there is a reason, but right now I'm supporting you. But when it's I'm in the wrong body and I need to cut some stuff to fix it, that's different than telling someone who you're attracted to. It's like they're not the same. So but I think parents feel like they're supposed to like be, and you are supposed to support your kid. But I mean, what does that even mean? The definition of support. It doesn't mean like if your kid tells you that they're a carrot, that you constantly dress them up like a carrot every day and say, "Hello, carrot, you are a carrot now." Like, come on, it's your kid. Um, and oh yeah, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've really lumped all these different communities together when they're all separate issues. Sexuality is something that is completely separate from the issue of gender dysphoria because I mean, it's you can't compare sexual attraction to believing that you were born in the wrong sex, feeling so insecure about your body that you feel like you have to change. Something that's I mean, these feelings are not an innate part of yourself. It is not your identity. And I feel like parents have to keep that in mind when they're dealing with with their child who feels this way about themselves. It is not an innate part of them. Their identity. They should be telling their children. I think the support that they should be giving them should be showing them love, letting them know that you love them as they are, that there is nothing wrong with the way that they're made, and then reinforcing their identity by teaching them that it doesn't come from superficial things like which sex you are, what body parts you have, what you look like, or what you consume, or how you dress yourself. It comes from what you do. It comes from your skills and your role in your family and your community. Encouraging them to build that through school clubs, through activities, through being on a sports team, working towards a goal, working towards betterment.
Yeah, man. Theater. Well, they pushed me into something, and I got to pick what that thing was going to be. But then when I did it, I felt a sense of community, and like when I turned 15, I felt my life just changed because I had something that I was good at, that there was a community involved. At first, it was sports, and I was not good, and so I got isolated and alienated. But my mom was like, "You got to do something." So you're playing baseball or you're playing soccer. And then eventually she's like, well, what do you want to do? And I decided I want to act. So like, okay, then I'm going to take you to the theater and you're going to audition. And off to the races from there. But that, man, having a community of peers working towards a common goal was like whatever I felt on the inside, it all became about what we're doing together. And then I was just one on the inside just kind of naturally formed in order to get that goal accomplished. Being like my identity kind of started to form around that.
I think that's incredibly important for a developing child.
When you were saying how you were on the internet and your parents weren't paying attention to what you were going through, it's kind of like, because I was thinking 1992, anytime I would go out on my bike, I'd ride around, I'd go over to Steve's house, my friend Steve or whatever, go over to my friend's houses, come back, my mom would be like, what'd you do today? And I would tell her. If I go to school, I'd come back, she'd be like, what'd you learn at school today? And I would tell her. But I never sat down and watched a TV show and then got done and she was like, what was the show about? She just assumed that what was going on in that box was like programmed, run by the FCC. Everything was fine. It's just TV. She'd seen it 100,000 times or whatever. So she never asked me what the show was about unless I wanted to tell her. So I think people are looking at the internet inadvertently like that, like it's a TV show.
Yes, there's definitely a bit of a generational gap in how we understand the internet and the dangers of it. Um, I feel like a lot of parents and people within the older generations don't really understand just how dangerous the internet can be. And even when they do, they often don't properly convey that to their children. They don't have those discussions of what the dangers are in a meaningful way.
Yeah, how are you going to have that conversation with kids? How are you going to tell them? Like when you have kids, how are you going to guide them on the internet or with the internet?
I think that part of the problem is that they're afraid to kind of fearmonger to make their kids anxious about it. Because I think it's something that isn't entirely bad. And at some point, I think you will have to introduce it to them and like guide them through how to use it safely and meaningfully. Because it's a tool for communication, it's a tool for learning. But they're afraid to talk to them about the dangers of the content that they could be exposed to of these bad actors that could be on the internet who can manipulate their children. I
Yeah.
think just teaching them how to discern between good intentions and bad, and to recognize when somebody might be manipulative or not have their best intentions in mind is important for any parent, for any child.
So like get ready because like so when they're six, when a kid's six and they're going to kindergarten, okay, one of their classmates might have a cell phone and their older sibling
Mm.
might have exposed them to porn when they're six. They might be bringing that into school and show my kid when he's six. Do I tell him when he's six what porn is before, just in case, and to watch out for it? And if you see it, because if your kid's like, what did you see? And the kid tries and explain it to you, they're not even gonna have the words to explain what they saw. They'll have the memory, but like the parent's gonna listen, they're gonna be like, okay. But unless the kid can show the parent the phone and be like, this is what I watched, and then the parent can be like, now I understand. That's how do you prepare? It's like my parents didn't tell me, by the way, in war, people get their intestines blown out and it's blood and guts. Like they didn't tell me that when I was not, there was no fear of exposure to it. But now, like you, what do you think? Do you preempt? Do you preempt it, or do you just like do damage control if and when it happens?
Yeah, that's a hard one because you can't always completely control what your child is exposed to outside the house. But I feel like in that situation, you'd have to get involved with the other person's parents and work that out with them.
It's actually a community building thing. It's probably intricate part of healing. This is coming together with other parents that have kids that have been exposed as well.
Yeah, I feel like we've really devalued community just in general. Like even just like anecdotally in my own neighborhood, like it's like every as close as everybody is, we've got houses next to each other and nobody is really interacting. There is no sense of community. And that's something that I think is all across the US.
I just saw a video on X of like 1999 before screens were in everybody's hands, and it was all these guys and girls just dancing together and like looking around with their heads up at some festival. That was really what it was like, and like people weren't like sending a picture of them. It was just like full on human to human contact. Do you would you homeschool your kids, or are you going to send them to public school? Like, what are your thoughts on all that?
I don't know. I'll have to see as that comes along once I have kids. Um, but I personally feel like I would prefer to put them in a homeschooling program. I've got a friend actually who's got a little brother, and it's not like he's just always at home, right, with like no social interaction or like never going outside. Um, it's like his mother actually does a lot of the schoolwork with him. They have calls with a homeschooling teacher as well, and like they have like a whole curriculum. And like once per week, once or several times per week, actually, they go to like a classroom with other homeschooled kids. And I think that's something that I would want for my own kid because that means like I get by homeschooling my kids, I get a say in everything that they're being exposed to in the curriculum, what I'm teaching them because I'm running it.
Now that I'm thinking, a thing called Playgroup. It was me and three of my friends. And every week, I think it was like every Tuesday or Thursday or something, one of the moms would take all four of us and we would play a game. Like at our house, we would build with building blocks and build little houses and stuff, castles and shit. And then at my other friend's house, we would play Thundercats, which is the show of the 80s. You know, I was like Mum-Ra, the villain, and then Bob was Lion-O. And we were all had a character from the show and we would run around and be like, ah. So there's like play acting. And then the other place we would watch Sesame Street and eat peanut butter sandwiches and go outside and play in the clubhouse and like so. And then at Josh's we would like do dig in the play with cars and I don't remember, but it was like that was kind of like homeschool. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was like a little pod. that was past. That's cool. Well, okay. I want to go on with your timeline of when you were transitioning, detransitioning. You said like when you were like 15 is when it started to hit the fan, or like 14. Like,
Yeah. Um, there was a bit of a honeymoon period with my transition, which I mean, when I was starting when I was starting these interventions in eighth grade, and even as like the physical changes were coming, I never really had like an official like coming out or anything to like my classroom or my teachers even. So most people at school had no idea going what was going on. So like this girl that they had known since like fifth grade, right? All of a sudden, like it's like puberty is reversing course for her, and she's going the other direction, and it was really bizarre for them to watch, I think. It just very, very jarring. Um, Especially for my teachers who probably were wondering like, what the hell's going on? But so most people didn't really know. I never really had that conversation. But I because of the like all the weird the changes and just the awkwardness at that time. Um,
what you said, all the weird what? The audio cut
like
out.
just the awkwardness at
All the
that.
weird what and all.
I was just very awkward at the time, so a lot of people picked on me. There was one particular boy during that school year actually who was instigating a lot of it, and he would get really weirdly like feely touchy with me. Like he would like stroke my arm or like squeeze it and say like, "Oh, you've got a lot of muscle for a girl." He would every time he would talk to me, he would like emphasize the fact that I was a girl, right? And he would ask me a lot of these very uncomfortable, very lewd questions. And in class, he would trip me, he would like spit on me, throw things at me. And the teachers and even like the kids around me would like observe this, and they wouldn't really do anything about it. And I remember telling some girls in my grade level, like, I'm scared of him. I'm scared that he's gonna hurt me. And they said, "Oh, well, he's never going to hurt you. He's not like that." As they were watching him do all these awful things to me. And before this, I didn't really care to like hide my breasts because I was pretty much always wearing like a baggy t-shirt or like a hoodie every day, so I didn't really think anybody was like really paying attention to that part of me. I never really thought about it a whole lot, although I was a little bit conscious of it. Um, but one day that changed, and that was the day that he sexually assaulted me, and I was terrified. This put this deep fear into me of being taken advantage of sexually ever again, of even being recognized as a woman. Because I started to associate my femininity and this particular part of me with weakness, with danger, and it was something. This incident. I didn't report to anybody, even my own friends, for years, um, because of it was very complicated because I was already in the mindset of, well, I was like a few months on testosterone. So I was already thinking like, I'm a boy, I'm a guy. Who's going to take me seriously as a guy if I tell them I just got sexually assaulted? I had this very feminine part of my body compromised. And if the girls at school were watching him treat me this way, and the teachers were complacent, I didn't think that I could trust anybody to help me feel safe. So I felt like I had to man up. I had to, I had to defend myself. And to me, that meant hiding my breasts and eventually getting them removed. Um, I started using sports bras and then buying binders, which are basically like these tank top looking garments that like have like compression fabric in them to flatten the appearance of the breasts. And I would wear these every day up until the day of my surgery, um, so that nobody could tell that I had breasts. And it was like I was putting on a mask every single day. It brought me comfort, but at the end of every single day, I would, like before showers and after I'd come home from school, I would take it back off, and my breasts were still there. Um, it was just a reminder that no matter what I did to myself, I never truly would change, and it made me want to run away from it. which is why I eventually got surgery down the line. But once I was in high school, I was on testosterone for long enough to look and sound like pretty much any other 14-year-old boy going to their freshman year. My breasts were no longer visible because I was wearing this compression garment, and I started being socialized like I was one of the boys. And I started being treated like one of them. I started to develop friendships in these male groups, and it was something that I was excited about. And frankly, like I still look back fondly on some of the times that I had, because it was a different dynamic. It I had I had friendships that I wouldn't have otherwise, but after some time, it just became my new normal, and those feelings of affirmation started to wear off, and I started to realize that it was kind of lonely being seen as a boy because I had a lot of issues in my interpersonal relationships, in my day-to-day life that now I didn't really feel like I could talk about because, well, I was a boy, I was a guy, and I was expected to be tough and keep it to myself and just work on it on my own. And I didn't really feel like I could be as intimate in my friendships and even with my in my relationships with some of my family members because now the dynamic was different, and even the way that the testosterone made me process my emotions was different.
What was it? What was different?
So it felt like I had higher highs, but also lower lows, and negative emotions in particular, like sadness, anger, um, frustration, were a lot harder for me just to deal with and to process in a healthy manner. And because I didn't really have a healthy outlet for doing so, it would often come out in ways, um, like I would get into a lot of fights, not physically, a lot of arguments mostly. I burned a lot of bridges during that time, um, and it was just incredibly difficult for me to deal with. And I mean, I found that by that I was starting to develop even more issues than I had before. Not only with the loneliness, with the changed dynamics, and not feeling like I had anywhere to turn to talk about these hardships, but I also was very insecure about how it affected my dating pool because now I was in high school and all my friends were starting to get into their first relationships, and I didn't really feel like I had anything. Like, sure, there were girls who thought I was cute, but I didn't really have any interest in them because I was still mostly straight and attracted to men. And the few boys who had um, any attraction towards me, often were much older, in a different grade level than I, or they had already graduated. So, I mean, I had some pretty slim pickings, and honestly, at that age, I really don't think that those things are that important. But it felt like a very lonely time in my life, and with the distress of the transition and the honeymoon period sort of wearing off, I and the effects of the testosterone on my sex drive, I didn't really have any guidance through this time because I wasn't actually raised as a boy. I didn't really have any male mentors to talk about the stress that that was putting on me. Um, and I started to seek that. I started to seek social validation from other avenues. Um, all of this made me very prone to being a target for sexual predators on the internet. And I mean, it was horrible for me because I never really felt like I could tell anybody about it because I was afraid of the repercussions. I was afraid of getting in trouble, of maybe like ruining somebody's life. Um, but I knew that these people didn't really love me. And I didn't feel, frankly, that I was deserving of love. I felt like the further that I went to transition, the more I loathed myself, the more disassociated I felt from my body, from my identity, from everybody around me. And I started to really fall into this deep depression. And by the time that I was in my sophomore year, I started going back to therapy after years of not seeing one. And for the first time in my life, I was suicidal. I wanted to die. They told my parents that transitioning would mitigate my suicide risk at a time when I wasn't suicidal, when I was in significant distress, sure, but I wanted to live. But now that I was going into this lifestyle, into this course of treatment, it was killing me from the inside out.
I have I have like a, I can relate to that in a way. It's in a different venue. Like when I was doing internet video for the first time in 2006, I kind of created a character of like this intense guy. It was like, Jesus, what would Jesus do with this technology? So I was trying to play the role of like, well, I'll pick up the ball where Jesus left. And it was like, not me, but the people started to love that character, and they would call it Ian Crossland, and they would really be like, Ian, you're, and they'd come and they'd see me and they'd look at me and they'd talk. And I was like, I hate myself. I hate that people don't know this isn't me, and I don't respect them because they think this truly is who I am when it's not. So I didn't hate, I mean, I kind of started, and I became suicidal. I never tried to kill myself, but I started to get ideations of like, God, this is just, I just didn't see anywhere. It was like, what have I created for my life? And it was like, I just left. I just went behind the scenes for a decade and kind of got everything back together. And now I'm just who I am for real. And it's much more, I still get the World Economic Forum and the New World Order. All this stuff is like, it's stressful, but it's not like I'm living a lie. I'm not living a lie anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible feeling having almost like created a caricature of yourself and feeling like you have to live that and go along with that and perform that every single day. It really disassociates you from who you really are. And because I was so deep into it, because I was on hormones for years, my voice, I looked like a boy. My voice was actually deeper than a lot of my actual male peers and even like a lot of the adult males around me. It's a miracle that it's as light as it is now, but I couldn't even fathom going back, even as it was obviously starting to destroy me. Um, and I even started having physical complications. I started like having like UTIs like almost every other month, and I would even like get like blood in my urine. And this is something that I was very ashamed to even report to a doctor to, and I was scared. I was I was terrified that I might have to be taken off of the testosterone for it. And even when I tried reaching out to my doctors, even once I to finally was able to muster up the courage to report this, they were very slow moving. They wouldn't like schedule tests or examinations in time, and by the time that they activated on it, they would be gone because this happened. This is something that would happen sporadically, and it felt like I wasn't really getting any help with this. And even as I was starting to deteriorate, both physically and mentally, they allowed me to go through the course of consultations for the surgery.
So you'd be like,
Just
I think
completely,
I'm, oh, what is that?
just completely ignoring the state that I was in.
Was it the testosterone? Did you ever figure out what exactly was it? Stress? Was it like a
Yeah,
combination of all?
I think it was definitely the testosterone because I never had this issue before in my life. I was perfectly physically healthy, and it stopped once I went off the testosterone.
And then you went, how old were you when you went through the surgery? Is this like when you were 15?
Yeah, I was 15. Like it was the summer just after I got out of my sophomore year, and the course of the consultations was incredibly quick. It was only I think it was only roughly about like half a year, maybe just a little bit over that. Between like first telling my therapist like I want to get my breast removed, and then actually going under the knife. And I spoke with my mom and dad the other day about these, just kind of looking back on what it was like going through this for them. And they said that like they the doctor who gave me the letter of referral to surgery had only seen me for about 20 or so minutes before giving me the go. That I was like, okay, you've been on hormones for this long, you still call yourself a boy, you're free to go to remove your perfectly healthy breasts. And
You
this
knew
is a
the guy for
doctor,
20.
yeah, this is a doctor who I had never seen before, who did not know me at all.
Dude, I went into the doctor about 5 months ago, and he was like, "How you feeling?" And I was like, "I'm stressed. You know, the World Economic Order is shifting or whatever." He's like, "You want something for that?" I'm like, "What? No, I meditate." And he was like, "Oh, that's good." He was like, "Yeah, I should meditate too." I'm like, "Yeah, it's good for you, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to still be stressed sometimes."
No, yeah, like for every single issue that I had, they really jumped the gun on medicating me for it. Um, for the diagnosis for ADHD when I was a kid, they started putting me on like all these different meds for like I was 10 years old, like 10, 11, 12 years old. That they were, I think at one point they told me like I was on the average dose for an adult male.
Oh,
Um,
of
yeah,
what?
of it was like different stimulants, I think like Ritalin, Focalin, stuff like that. And then once I started having depression related deficits in my school performance as I was transitioning, they were like, yeah, let's put you back on it, but let's do short release this time.
Meaning it hits you harder. It's a smaller dose that hits you harder, faster, or something.
Faster, yes. And within a shorter range of time. So you have to like take it multiple times per day if you're having like a full work day or like if you're at school. Um,
Anecdotally, I took Adderall just a couple of times because my friend gave it to me, and I was like, "Well, let's find out." And I was like, "Ooh, I'm the life of the party tonight." But then I got constipation, and I was like, I don't want constipation."
it really is the worst. Like it would put me in it would only work about half the time to help me actually focus on something. But when it did, I would just be glued to whatever I was doing. And like I would be so focused that I'd forget to take care of myself. I like by the end of the day, like I'd have like a massive headache. I'd be super dehydrated. I'd be starving. And I mean, to be put back on those medications while I was already in a state where I was dissociated from my body, it just kind of furthered that barrier between my mind and and my body.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the wild thing about like disassociative psychoactives is like it can in the right dosage, it's like a magnifying lens. In the right dosage, you can turn it just a little bit and you get a better focus. But if you over tweak it, it's like it's blurry again.
Mm.
What did you how did you snap out? Like what happened that you were like, you know what, I'm done. I'm gonna I'm fine. I am who I am. Let's go.
It was a surgery. It was a surgery that marked the end of my transition. I never really had any feelings, particularly negative feelings about my transition or any sense of regrets until after my breasts were gone. And I think that a big part of it was just how stressful it was recovering from that. I mean, I was told about like that would be kind of a grueling process that because like a bunch like tissue is being removed from this area of my body where there's a bunch of connective tissue, I would have some mobility issues for a few months up to a year, and that I would have to like take care of like the dressings and the wounds and such. But nothing really prepares you for that. Nothing prepares you for looking down at your own body and seeing what looks like a bloody battlefield until you're actually in it. Um, and like once I woke up from the surgery, it was like, wow, like I'm finally past this part of my life. I'm like, this is so cool. I'm finally going to be whole. And one day I'm going to be able to fully heal. I'm going to be able to take my shirt off and bare my chest to the sun and be like just like any other man. And that never happened. I never fully healed. I never became a man. And just within a few months, for the first time in years, I would look at other women, see how pretty they were, and feel envy. I missed my femininity. I wanted to be pretty again. But I mean, the transition gave me a way to kind of escape from that feeling. Like I was competing, like I was being judged based on my appearance. And once I realized that this part of me was taken away forever, that I would never have it back, that I was very deep into this process, it started to terrify me. And I couldn't fathom going back. But I try to justify it in my head as well. Yeah, I'm still transgender. I'm still a boy. Maybe I'm just an effeminate man because sometimes men like feminine things too. Sometimes they like being pretty too, right? And eventually that became, well, I don't feel happy either way. Maybe I'm just non-binary. Maybe I don't deserve to be either male or female. Maybe I'll never be good enough as either. And I just kept going into this almost psychotic downward spiral. Um, until the very end of my junior year of high school when I was taking a class in psychology. Um, and the end of the course was focused quite a bit on family and how children develop from infancy to adulthood and how parenting plays a role in that. And it was the first time that any of those concepts really had, that I had been learning about it in such detail. Like during my consultations for the hormones and eventually the surgery, they would like briefly mention that there might be some, can't remember how they phrased it. It was so vague, like certain um, side effects for your reproductive capabilities, for your ability to conceive and have children. Um, I knew that I wouldn't be able to breastfeed after my breasts were gone, but I was thinking like I'm a boy growing into a man. Like what, even if I became a parent, like what father breastfeeds their children? Like that's not what men do. And I also didn't understand just how complex, how beautiful those things really were. And at the age that I was, I just wouldn't have been able to make a definitive decision on something like that. I wouldn't have enough experience in my life or the maturity to be able to do that. And yet, as I was
That
reading this more and more, I became very conscious of that, of the fact that parts of myself as a woman, as an adult, could be ripped away from me forever while I was still a kid. And that broke me.
what'd you do after that?
For a while, I couldn't do anything. I gave up on everything in my life. I gave up on my schoolwork. I stopped studying. I would just spend a lot of my days crying to myself in my room, isolating myself. And this was like about a year or so into quarantine. So I didn't really have any friends anymore from school. I wasn't really going out and interacting because my school was following the distance learning model. Um, but one day I realized I just couldn't take it, and I broke down to my mom, called a friend of mine as well, and just bawled about how much I regretted my transition, how much it made me hate myself and my body, and how I wished none of it had ever happened. And for a while, I just was not functional at all. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to call myself. Um, but after a little bit, I started to kind of really think about it in my head, questioning what was going on. And I didn't even know that it was a word. I didn't know that it was a thing until it happened to me. But I thought, what if I'm detransitioning? And I looked up the word detransition, and I discovered that there was a whole community online of other people who are just like me, people who went through this very same course of treatment, who lived this way for years and came back out of it on the other side with deep regret, with trauma, with body parts and years of their life lost. And I started talking to these people, and it helped me to understand just what happened to me, how wrong it was, and the ways that I was manipulated by my doctors, by this community. And it helped, it brought me peace. Just knowing that I wasn't alone in this, looking at these other older people who were further into the process, who are now able to live fairly normal lives even after what they had gone through. And it gave me hope to continue going on. But it filled me with pain to know that I wasn't the only one. And these were all adults who I was speaking to at this time. It was almost all people who started um, at least after the age of 18 and were now like fairly into their pretty far into their 20s and their 30s. But I just had this intuition that there had to be another kid like me somewhere out there. And it wasn't just one or 10 or 100. It had to be thousands of other kids. And just that epiphany made me feel like I had a responsibility to get myself together and to do something.
The stuff you do is some of the most inspirational in my life. I don't know why, but it is. I just love you, man. This is so great. We've been going for a long. We've been over an hour. We have an hour show, man. It's so good to see you again, and thank you,
Yeah,
Chloe.
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I
And
hope it
thank you for having me on.
was so
It's good
great.
to
Let's
see you
do it
again.
again in the future someday. Yeah, man. Yes. Awesome. Everyone that's watching, Chloe Cole, I love you. Do you have any final thoughts before I wrap it?
Um, I think we covered a lot, and if I go any further, we might as well just have to schedule another episode.
Yeah, okay, let's do it then. All right, everybody, like the video, share the video with everybody you know, and follow the channel and Chloe as well. Chloe Cole. I have your Twitter in the description on YouTube and on Facebook. And do you have any other websites or links or anything where people follow your work?
Yeah, I'm also on Instagram, and I have a YouTube channel as well. And I'm actually doing an interview series of other detransitioners.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, Chloe Cole on YouTube. All right, everybody, have a good day. Bye.